And we're live. Okay, welcome back. We are in the impact of AI in financial regulatory compliance panel discussion. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a round of self introductions in alphabetical order, starting with AZ. AZ, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Aurelije Zovko. They call me AZ. My first name is not easy to pronounce, even with great meaning. And I always joke I'm A to Z. I'm a founder and a CTO and chief architect still coding of Xenia Graph. Xenia Graph is boutique knowledge graph machine learning company building, different solutions in space of knowledge graphs, helping with data problems and heavy on machine learning and graph machine learning and a long experience doing machine learning for very, very long time for big financial organizations and currently working on data privacy regulation project for big financial institution. So that's all.
Thank you, Aureli. Joakim?
Thank you. My name is Joakim Nilsson. I'm a consultant for Capgemini, knowledge graph lead in Sweden. And my experience is helping clients with their building their knowledge graph solutions, both here in Sweden and abroad. I also have a background in accounting before I started in the IT field. Which comes very handy when dealing with this kind of fraud detection tasks that I've been doing now for last year and a half.
Thank you, Joakim. Michael?
Hey guys, thank you again, Joakim, for having us. Michael Borrelli and partners. So we're an AI governance technology vendor. We also provide consulting and training services with respect to the EU AI Act, so helping companies with the implementation and compliance efforts with the EU AI Act. Business was started by my business partner Sean, tech accountant, so like Joaquin, very familiar with number side of things. He was involved in implementation of GDPR, and we built this together. And I have a background in financial services compliance, so hopefully to add that perspective, the conversation with my esteemed co-panelists.
Satya?
My name is Satya Das. I am based out of Bangalore in India. I work for Unisys as Director of Product Solutions for Banking and Financial Services. I have been starting with my career with a bank right here in India. I've moved into IT of late, and I've been in the IT industry for close to 2 decades now. My work entails dealing with products and solutions, building them from scratch to modernization to doing pre-sales in the past, as well as product development and marketing, taking the product forward to the market. So I deal with a lot of stakeholders in my company and outside of it, including the clients, the engineering team, the supply chain engineering, and related teams to take the product, manage the product lifecycle management, and looking forward to contributing into this discussion.
Excellent. Well, I think just listening to the background and experience of this group of panelists, we have a rich fertile ground for a very nice conversation. So I think it'd be great if we can just kick this conversation off by defining what it means to work within regulatory compliance and to be compliant to governance at large. So would anybody like to start us off in defining this?
I can start off if you want. I think it's interesting to compare what we mean by compliance today and what it was before. So compliance is a very contested term anyway. And historically, or at least the status quo at the moment, is it seems to be a box ticking. Oh, I've done this, it's done, next thing, please. So it's almost a very static thing where it's actually evolved into more of a dynamic phenomenon, and some would say fairly nebulous, but that means is it's ongoing. It's not just, hey, I've done it once. It's there, and you have to comply with it on an ongoing basis and showcase where you are. And it's very much tied to the life cycle of an AI system. So from design and inception to decommission across the whole life cycle, managing AI risks as and when they arise, and having the governance and compliance aspects in place. I use the terms, I won't go too much into details, but what I mean by that is processes, procedures, and policies in place to govern it. And it's going to depend on, sure, the size, nature, scale, and complexity of your business. And some of my co-panelists probably know this in quite some detail, but I think the compliance element is critical where we are now to reinforce that level of trust that seems to have evaporated from the market because of various things that have happened. And we need to stop that trend from happening.
I'd like to add, I completely agree with Michael. My experience working with big financial investment banks and even insurance space, it is getting to be, it's a lot of manual processes, but it's getting, I will say, near real time, and regulations are changing, and as we know, a lot of systems are not easy adaptable to some regulation changes, and how to test and ensure that you're not breaking regulations and that you're compliant. And if you even just add data privacy, in my opinion, we are getting a little bit more with the security, right? Security thinks they like to protect us in real time for threats and intrusions, right? And I see, part of regulations coming not to be a real time, but I would say maybe near real time, and very similar things that you need to really understand complexity of many things. It's not just, hey, this one regulation, because things are connected and different processes. If it's a global organization, they have some processes, different processes for different countries, and all of that kind of bringing complexity. And in my opinion, we are getting to the near real time kind of ensuring the data is protected, that we are in compliance. And then if you add the mix that you're building, machine learning models, not just regular solutions, right? That's even more complicating things, right? So almost like what I'm trying to build right now for that big financial institution is really near real time, using knowledge graph and large language model, machine learning, and classical graph algorithms to understand the risk. But as we know, the basic things is data need to be connected, right? And you need to clean your data, what's not simple task, right? And not just for regulations for any machine learning, even building solutions, right? So my point is what Michael said is coming to be a near real time, and we need to react very fast to be in compliance. And so that's kind of my experience lately.
I can go next. I want to start and extend that. From my perspective, I deal with building products and solutions to take to the market, right? So from that perspective, I would use the word early. How early I know about the clarifications of all the compliances that product must be compliant with is very important for me, because if you miss it at the early stage, it's very difficult to avoid rework, give justification about why some changes have to be done and things like that. So the earlier it is clearer for me in the roadmap or in the early stages conception, from regulatory point of view, it's great for me to know. The second is about when you build a global product. It's more challenging because there is no one regulation, and I'm sure for AI also it is not going to be like that. We hope it's going to be like that, but it may not be. So within the country also there are state related regulations. So when you build a product for different markets to sell globally, you have to be absolutely clear about what I'm going to do for different countries and different regulations which are there. Regulations are, I would say, fundamentally not different from one another, but there might be some typicalities of where data has to be stored, how it has to be shared, and things like that, which can differ from country to country. So these are two aspects which I would highlight from compliance, what it means to me, at least from that point of view.
Yeah, and at least here in Sweden and the EU, we have constantly new regulations. That's the one thing we can trust on, getting more regulations. And that is something if you work for a global company, or if you have a project for a big client, and if you have multiple locations. They can have different legislation, and it keeps getting more and more regulations all the time. So it's hard, even if you want to comply, it's hard sometimes to know exactly what these rules mean for you in the end. And especially with all these new regulations just piling up, I think having a system to really navigate that can help a lot.
And I like to if you try using Gen AI LLMs, right, and try to explain, what is the risk, and there is a new client, we need to onboard new client, and how to assess the risk, and how to monitor the risk in real time, right? And it's very manual, and you do maybe once or twice a year. But complexity on technology, it's not that simple, because as we know, what Joakim said, it's regulations are not straightforward. It's not like, I'm getting stocks and prices, and I can do NLP and extract things, and I can be very confident, let's say using Fiber or any other ontologies, that my extraction and my data is clean and good, right? But with regulations, it's always not simple to map it on technology, especially with Gen AI. So that's adding extra complexity to define the rules and really define, that you have a contract and different regulations, and how to map that to the systems and data you have, and which system using which data, and how is that shared across organization. And then what Satya said, if you add that the global reach, and it's very different, it's just what I'm trying to say, it's not on technology, even simple task to build some solution which will be automated, and I'm getting again to be maybe in near real time, ensuring compliance and regulations.
I just want to say, I don't have a candlestick to any of these guys in accounting, banking, finance, insurance. These guys are titans in these areas. But it doesn't take an expert to understand that any kind of organization that holds power or impacts the lives of communities, individuals, government agencies, that's moving monetary value across places, needs to be held to a higher standard of accountability, right, in the ethical sense. So maybe we can explore a little bit of the evolution of how data regulations has kind of been shaping the views and mechanisms that are now shaping the AI regulations.
Yeah, I think you've hit on an interesting point there, Joaquin. So back to the analogy, if we think of, we covered this before, if data is the new gasoline, as some would say, or the new oil, as some is being called in other ways, then AI is the combustion engine. And GDPR was seen as the regulation of the data, and the EU Act is now the regulation of the combustion engine. So this has been espoused by the founder of AI Partners, Sean. And the thing here is that because of this interplay, well, there's a bit of background noise, because of the interplay between AI and data, it's almost like a symbiotic relationship. So the Data Governance Act, the Data Governance Act interplays and interfaces with the EU AI Act. So could, for example, if you're compliant with the Data Governance Act and you have good procedures, it's likely but not certain that you'll adhere to Article 10, which covers data and data governance. Because as again, co-panelists are probably very familiar with this. Everyone talks about the junk in, junk out type of thing. Well, from a regulatory standpoint, if you put junk in and you're not aware of it, that could get you in some very serious, have some very serious implications.
I would add into what Michael just said from the evolution point of view. Okay, so it's not that data is new. We all had data. I mean, whether it's banking, financial services, or any other industry, right? We have, as human, the human race, we have piled data. Now we are exploring what we have to do next with it, right? So data is not new. We had even regulations like GDPR, LGPD in the Brazil, and so on and so forth in other countries, which are governing how data has to be managed and how customer interest has to be protected. But now it's the next game, right? So in the evolution, we need to have large amount of data, which might be interrelated, which might not be. But if we bring all of them together and find meaning out of it, can it help us as a co-pilot, so to say, to make decisions, automate some of this lower strategic tasks, probably operational tasks, to take it forward. So from the evolution point of view, we are in the next game, how to bring in all these capabilities through what AI is throwing us at this point in time. But what we have to be also careful is that, yes, there are regulations coming in and things like that, but what we don't know is how is this technology going to unfold in next 2-3 years? What is coming next? Is that going to challenge the current set of regulations? That we are not aware of at this point in time.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting with the regional differences when it comes to regulations. Like they say that in the US they innovate and in Europe they regulate. So what kind of effect that also will have on the future of all this kind of Gen AI and these companies that are innovating, if more and more dominance in the US and if EU will start even more lagging behind, because it will be too much regulations to.
Yeah, I like to add spin about technology, right? We had regulations and there was some translation engine, and then most likely in the code we will say, if something, then do something, right? And maybe some expert system kind of prologue, forward, backward chaining, right? But what we are right now with Gen AI and everything, right, is question, how we can train Gen AI to understand regulations. And I don't think just simple prompt engineering on few shots learning will work. So I think we need to probably spend time to retraining, and in my opinion, just Gen AI or large language model, even specialized language models for compliance regulations will need some kind of a knowledge graph, knowledge base, some kind of well-defined ontologies. If you don't know, the W3C just released the second version of data privacy vocabulary. It's a huge ontology for data privacy, which is a huge step forward, but I'm thinking that needed for some knowledge graph property or RDF graph, with some good semantics ontology, and then kind of using, Gen AIs to train them to understand terminology, right? And then be able to really, what I call, and I'm thinking lately, to build some kind of digital twin in regulations, almost have a regulator digital twin using knowledge graph and be able to do my regulatory stuff and again, be near real time. So I think that's how I see the transition from the current implementation of things to getting to the Gen AI knowledge graph, new waves of things. And I'm thinking that it will be huge improvement, right? Before we are far from, translating one regulation, new regulation, need to change the code. We know that will take forever and you will always be late, right? So getting to near real time and able to have a, proper way to describe the regulations and apply it and train maybe large language model with knowledge graph that it can be, digital twin in real time, ensuring regulations. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now in my vision, where technology will go and help us to be compliant.
I think part of the complexity in being obedient to all these different regulations is the sheer fact that AI is an obfuscated term that can mean many different things to many different people. So how can you bring order and ruling to something that in itself is a fuzzy term that people aren't taking care to really understand all the different underlying implications that these flavors of technology have in data and on systems. So with that being said, one of the key points that we wanted to highlight in this conversation was know your AI system. That sort of has to do with that fuzzy term. What does AI mean to whom? Would you guys like to comment on that?
If I may there, so the term KYAO, which was coined by the team at AI and Partners, it draws is the AI equivalent of KYC. So if people in the audience familiar with KYC, know your client. If you wanted to, for example, if you wanted to open a bank account and you went to say Santander or Lloyd's or whatever, you go in and you give your profile, you give all your KYC information, say, look at your bank statements, employment history, and your age, gender, all those bits and pieces. They will then assign you a risk level, which determines how they treat you. So whether you're low, medium, or high, it could depend on interest rates. It could depend on how frequently they look at your profile, what you have access to, the types of risk level, the types of products that you're eligible for, etc. So the same concept applies to an AI system. In the KYAI, depending on the risk level of your AI system, it determines how and what and why and who can use an AI system. The regulation EU Act was a risk-based approach, which follows the risk-based approach of financial crime, and that's what it means. Now, it can be interpreted multiple ways. So it could even be pushed as far back in the process as what is AI. But the KYAI process, as we understand it, and of course my co-panelists may have other ideas, is what AI is at that stage, and we're going by the legal definition, which is everything that's automated decision making based on data. So any AI system, model, algorithm, or prompt, once you know what it is, you then do the risk classification. So you truly know what AI system it is and what the risk level is.
I think the best thing to do is the regulators to come up with some kind of a definition, which I think the European Union has already done. So it broadly defines what AI and AI-related system means. And I mean, regulations are always about interpretation, isn't it? So it's all written there, but how do you interpret and validate that what you mean is what the regulators version means is always a question. That's why we have attorneys, legal department, which is there. So I would say, always to go back to understand what different regulators in different countries, if we are addressing a certain market, has defined the way. I'm sure it's not going to be very different from one another, but nevertheless, you should understand that. And then based on what basis they classify, as Michael just said, the European Union has taken a risk-based approach, right? So what is the risk out of that AI system which is coming in? Once you understand those definitions and the boundaries and the pluses and minuses of that, and then we see where does it exactly fall in, then we can actually take a decision about whether it's strategic or operational decision or commercial decision to classify it and be sure that this what I'm doing is exactly falling into this definition of the regulation that we have.
Yeah, I think it's really important with the know your AI, because that's one way maybe we can reduce the risk of over-regulation. If you have an AI system that is not as risky, maybe you don't need to comply with all those regulations otherwise, because that's something we experience a lot here with a lot of over-regulations and a lot of policymakers that maybe aren't as knowledgeable of AI as we would wish.
Yeah, I like to add, for me, it's not know your AI, it is boiling to know your data, because, models are models, but, depending which data you use, it could be completely different. And I don't sound like a broken record, all roads going to knowledge graph, but, kind of key for me is to make sense of your data. And I manage machine learning model in production, and needed to ensure that the regulatory and bias and everything. And it's so hard process, not about machine learning model, because we didn't have like thousands of machine learning models, but all this model using different data, and this data is changing in production. So to really kind of ensuring that that everything is good, it was very hard, right? And you need to do some data lineage catalog and kind of creating sandboxes for data scientists or machine learning models running in development, and clearly understanding what data they're using, what data is changing. And usually data scientists will say, give me all data, right? So you need to, so my point is, it is boiling down that you know your data. What's not simple task to any organization. But I think, for me, knowing your data, having data lineage, exactly managing your data and understanding, who is using data. Of course, to do data privacy, everything, you need to understand who is using your data, with whom you're sharing your data, right? So I will say knowing your AI is really boiling to basic step will be know your data and ensure proper data governance and processes. And that will help you to get to the AI as like Michael, I think, said, the combustion engine, right? You need to be sure what you're feeding to your engine because it can produce different results.
Something that I've come as a pattern from all these different events and discussions is this usage of data as something that is self-evident, right? But data really is something that is a consequence of statistical analysis, right? We have a guess, we have hypothesis, and we collect data to validate or invalidate the hypothesis. That term has transported over to computer science, and it's now used to reflect how we represent the world and implementations of those instances of how many customer transactions have occurred, or how much money do you have in the bank, or very concrete things like that. But the fact of the matter is that most people don't really have a level of data literacy, much less of tech literacy, of how data is consumed in an enterprise technical system. So how can we expect people or organizations en masse to adopt and adhere to these AI regulations if there's such a deficiency in the foundational knowledge that is required for them to understand how this impacts them?
I will start. I manage data analytics for big banks, and it is extremely hard. As we know, we build a lot of warehousing. We're talking about data lake now. Finally, through Databricks, they're talking about data lake and kind of don't move your data. But majority organization having transaction system, building warehousing, now moving everything to cloud and data lake. So it's a lot of data everywhere, right? And only way for me to be successful, at least start understanding what's going on, is coming to knowledge graph, right? So to build a data lineage, data catalog that I build in many organizations, that every ETL or ingestion pipeline, right, has metadata, and you need to collect that metadata, put it in knowledge graph, connect it through who is the source, who is changing data. So if you ever get to the business and you say, and I went in front of traders and I say, hey, I have a great algorithm, I will tell you what to do, and you know what will happen, right? First, they will not believe it. Second, they will say, where's the data? What is this data field? How you get it, right? So I think for me, it's a hard work, but you need to start with kind of some semantic layer. You need to map your data. You need to show that you have metadata. You understand, where data is going and who's using data, and really build that what they call the enterprise knowledge graph. So that's one way I built that in the past, ensuring that I know who is using data, and I'm ensuring that I know models which data using, and is any bias or what's going on, right? That's a basic step.
I would add to that and say managing these bits and pieces requires a level of literacy. So believe AZ touched on having data literacy or inferring that, and I think we're at the age, or suddenly at a stage where we need to have AI literacy. That is a requirement under Article 4. The best way to do that is upskilling, so doing both courses on AI's capabilities as well as what the EU AI Act is. So understanding what the regulatory requirements are, upskilling on those, the same way you did for GDPR, you did training courses, the same concept applies for that. Upskill, know what it is, know how the regulations affect, and go from there. I believe Gartner have issued a recent survey or data on this, which, or is AI Business, either one of the two, which specifically says that AI engineering is one of the fastest growing jobs out there for anyone in the AI space. So any aspiring or indeed established AI engineers would need to have a requisite level of knowledge, skills, and expertise to comply with Article 4. But that is obviously reliant on sufficient upskilling as well.
Yeah, I agree. Upskilling will be crucial, of course, and also using a knowledge graph to keep track of all your data, to get the data lineage and traceability. That is really hard to get otherwise. So some kind of semantic layer on your or the enterprise knowledge graph, I think, will be a key to be able to successfully adhere to all these new regulations.
I agree with all my fellow panelists, but let me give a little slightly different perspective about how it has to be driven probably in an organization, and especially in a bank or financial services organization. The typical question always comes about, in the boardroom is about whether it is data to decisions or decisions to data, right? That's a very important strategic aspect to understand. It to me, it cannot be bottoms up for a bottom-up approach for a technology like AI and with advent of Gen AI. It has to be strategic, and it has to be coming from the top and getting implemented towards to the lowest level of the organization. Why I say so is that you can't ask as a CEO or C-level executive saying that, tell me what data we have in our organization, I'll make decisions on it. No. You have to say that what decisions you have to make a hypothesis out of it, and then involve your data and data engineers to find out what data where we have, what are the sources, is there a mapping of that, do we understand well how well we are prepared to apply models, and then you go and apply models and then see the outputs and then try to refine it for decision making. So I would say it has to be strategically driven from the top, and there has to be a top group assigned if it's a bigger organization to drive that with different aspects, contributing from legal, from operations, from strategy point of view, and of course technology point of view, to drive that towards the end, to the bottom of the organization, and then have your decisions or the at least hypothesis that you want to make to be clear, so that the data and the data team can work on it, the technology team can work on it, apply models to bring results for refinement.
At large, how do we feel is the maturity of organizations in different territories relative to the AI regulations?
I think I can start on that. So I think last week there was a report published, not remembering the name of the publisher, where they ranked AI maturity across banks, across different geographies. And what I could see is that most of the bigger banks, if I look at the JP Morgan, Citibanks, Lloyds of the world, right, who are much more prepared and have been having a larger data team, are much more prepared from that point of view, because they're continuously having a base to create and then understand what regulations are going to ask them to do. And fundamentally, regulations are not going to bring something which we do not know. It's all we know, that we have to be ethically using it. We don't have to be, the customers or the end users or the consumers the interest has to be protected and safeguarded. And those are guardrails which the regulators bring in. So from maturity point of view, I would say the bigger banks, the biggest of the banks in the world, and some geographies like at least the UK, in Europe, and Australia and US and Canada, some of those banks are much more prepared, the bigger banks, but not so much from the tier 2, 3 or 4 banks, right? So they are yet in the learning process. Not everything is available at the right optimum level of preparedness to apply models and find end solutions which they are looking forward to. So my view is that it is still very much concentrated towards the very big banks or the most proactive banks which have a larger data team and they've been working for it for the last 4 or 5 years, but not so much on the lower rung of the banks across the world.
I'd like to just add to Satya's point there. He'll probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was referring to the Evident AI Index.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike. Yeah,
it was a great report. And I'd just like to echo your thoughts. I think benchmarking your maturity and using indexes like that is a good way of showing how an organization is progressing. I think there's another one by a company called Tortoise Media have benchmarked, but at a country level. So they've looked at countries' level of maturity across 3 pillars and these types of things. So they give you an indication as to the maturity, but again, it depends on different sectors and different subsectors approach. And to draw parallels or relevance to the EU AI Act, there's something called the AI Pact, which is an ongoing pan-European initiative composed of people across the industry, policymakers, lawmakers, etc., where the best practices and standards are being set. Now, one can say it's fair to see that the more mature organizations will be more forthright and have the more established and comprehensive procedures. And again, you can draw influence from things like MiFID II, CRD4, Basel II, and all these bits and pieces. But I think what AI actually represents, really, if it truly levels the playing field, just to throw it out there, and a rebalancing of the general market, the level of maturity may not be as significant because people are going to have the resources and capabilities to level the playing field. Put simply, innovators and startups could actually move faster and more effectively than large incumbents.
Yeah, I like to add, in my opinion, I think there are still a lot of manual processes, at least from my experience. And, like building solutions and building machine learning models and putting in production and regulations, everything is not the same process. So what with my clients, Enneagraph is trying to do, we are trying to make this part of software lifecycle, like, agile process. That's the only way you can really do it. Otherwise, if it's not part of your, I'm going to production, right? We all know if you're going to production, security will say, hey, did you scan your code? Is there any vulnerabilities, right? Are you good or not? And they have all power not to let you in production. I remember a huge project. I worked a year, and then security said no, and of course, all roads get to me. Why I didn't deploy that weekend, right? So I'm thinking the same notion will be that that must be part of the software development process, right? When we deploy things, even maybe when we build things, we need to have those, things there to boost our maturity. And when it's part of the development process, I think our maturity will grow. And I see it only way to make it is through proper agile software lifecycle.
I think the question of how ready organizations are for this varies a lot, as said here by previous speakers. The bigger customers that I hear about, they're talking a lot about the new AI Act, but the mid-sized to smaller ones, you don't hear that much. So I think it's very varied, depending a lot on the type of organization and the size.
What about on the other side of the coin? Now we've talked about regulations and what it means and what different territories, how they are more lenient or more stringent. What about on the other side of the coin with commercialization efforts? I think Michael said U.S. tends to innovate and the EU tends to regulate. How do we feel about that?
I can go on it if others can follow. So I think even in the European Union Act, to my knowledge, there is concept of, what role each of the entities are playing in the ecosystem. It's about, say, are you a distributor or provider? So for example, somebody like me who is trying to build solutions and sell to others, and there are consumers on the other side which are meant to mainly B2B clients, the importers or deployers, the industry terminology which is there. So based on that point of view, everybody, it's important to understand who is playing what role and what regulations are applying to them. So when you actually try to do that, whether the innovation piece or the regulation piece actually is your responsibility or somebody else's responsibility in the ecosystem is also important to know. So it's based on what role you're playing, and what regulations mean to you might be very different from the other players that are there in the market. So it's like, if a bigger bank building its own solution has a different ballgame altogether, and then probably if it is trying to deploy or install a solution which is built by a vendor, it's a completely different ballgame altogether. So it depends on what is my role, my organization's role, and what I'm trying to do in the ecosystem of this, and then try to understand the regulations around it, and then get it implemented accordingly, and then understand others' roles also regarding how they are influenced or they're interlinked, so to say, from one another. So, but you're right. I think by and large, since the technology is new, European Union has put the first guardrails of saying that what you should not do, or what the approach is, how do you classify risk, and first of all eliminate what you cannot do, and then classify the rest of the into 2 or 3 categories, finally ending up with the general purpose AI. And US, yeah, we have not seen yet a firm law yet in US, because of they don't want to kill innovation. That's their approach, they're saying. But it doesn't mean that the European Union is trying to kill also innovation. No, everybody wants innovation, but it's different approach or terminologies that you use to say the same probably topic around the world, but there might be differences which is there. So probably US is waiting a little bit more, saying that let it evolve and try to understand what roles different players are going to play, and then accordingly form the laws so that innovation is put on primary rather than restricting people to do. As some of the fellow panelists said, that there might be innovators. It's not about only incumbent banks which are trying to do. There are a lot of fintechs which are coming in whose main role is to do experimentation and bring new solutions to the market.
Yeah, I think there is a risk with each approach, but the risk I would see is that if EU is regulating too much and the US gets ahead, it can be hard to catch up later. They will have the first mover advantage and economy of scale, and that's something that I think it's a cultural thing. It's not only about the AI or IT. I think overall EU has a lot more emphasis on regulation than the US. So that it's I guess more of also a cultural thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what they said, but it depends what type of market you want. Sure, yeah, they can say regulation stifles innovation, but it depends what type of innovation you want. If you want a market full of unchecked products that and there's no way to hold people to account, there's no liability, then yeah, regulation is going to stifle that. But if you want a market that protects consumers, gives people that level of comfort and trust and confidence that the market has integrity, then it's necessary. Put it this way: financial services is heavily regulated, and particularly about consumers. So let's say elderly and vulnerable members of the population, making sure that their current accounts are protected. Would you be comfortable if there's lesser regulation applied to them on the argument that, oh, it's going to stifle innovation in fintech, we need less regulation?
Yeah, no, I think there is a balance for sure, and I think sometimes the US is under-regulated. So I think it will be interesting to see the coming couple of years how it plays out with the new regulations. And we still have a lot of good startups in the IT and the Gen AI field here. And even from my city, the Neo4j, it's a Swedish graph database company, and I would say the biggest one. So it's definitely possible to innovate in the EU as well.
though it's a pain in the butt to have to adhere to these regulations and stringent protocols, as Michael and everybody else is pointing out, we want to protect consumers, especially with these kinds of systems, since they have a disproportionate impact on population. How do we feel regarding the impact that it's having on the maturity of developers and their own workflows? Previously, things were less regulated, so people felt more comfortable violating or getting shortcuts into the code and developing these systems to get things out. But now with these regulations, as Satya was saying earlier, the earlier you know the requirements, the earlier you know what to comply to, the more stringent and thorough you can be in the construction of these systems. So how do we feel about the maturity of developing and engineering as a result of these regulations?
I think developers are very right. Their goal is to write code as fast as they can, right? Even you push them to write unit tests, right? And sometimes people will just say assert true and finish unit testing, right? So, and regulations are not simple. So I'm getting back to security analogy, right? We need the tools to scan the work we do. I'm not just saying code, even maybe other artifacts and able to guide. So one thing, is to build something that, let's say we build a large language model that developer can go and ask, oh, this is piece of code, is it part of regulation, support regulation, or, things like that, right? So maybe one way is to help. I think Michael said we need training and education, right? So that's, for me, one way I'm thinking part of SDLC and agile process, how to build a, chatbot or intelligent agent, which will be able to work with developers, right? Help them ask questions, is data privacy regulations, any question they can ask. And again, like very regular stuff. If it's part of development process, right? You will not get to production. Someone will say, hey, this is not, it's compliance issues, right? You can go to production. So, but I don't think the developers are far from understanding regulations and complying.
Yeah, that's right. Probably what I was going to say is that when I said this has to be strategic, for a developer, if I'm a developer, I'd ask, am I solving the right problem or not? Okay, is my problem statement clear or not? What inputs I'm taking into the model and what am I expected to give you must be very clear to them, because when we talk about maturity for developers, there might be one way is to look at whether I know the tools and techniques very well or not. The other is about how do we apply that to the business scenario which is given me to whether build a product or solution, whatever it may be, right? Especially in banking and financial services, a lot of process and domain knowledge is important while solving the problem. So do we have a right blend of that already given to the development team to make them understand really about what problems we are trying to solve out of whatever projects or products that we are trying to build in. So I would say maturity for this kind of a technology is in these two aspects of technology and applying to the business domain. It's still at a very evolving stage. That's why I'm saying that repeatedly, probably it has to be strategically driven. Do we want to do, all different things at the same time, or you want to focus on one problem at a time to try to solve that is going to be important. So a strategic direction combined by technology and business prowess and continuous checking and learning, right? Refinement is going to be the way forward.
Anyone else? If you want to share insights from your on-ground experiences, whether it's from auditing these systems or constructing new ones, anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
I'll maybe just add, like, I don't know if anybody tried to build a machine learning platform, right? A non-production platform using production data. Good luck. And it's not just developers, right? It's whole that process of governance and process around data, and then who has access to that data and how is it tested and how you move to cycle from dev, QA, UAT to prod. So for me, it is maturity of developers, but maturity of the process. And I agree with Satya, that must come from top, right? But otherwise, business will always drive you to deliver something as fast as you can, and you tend to kind of do shortcuts. So, must come from top and be clear to everybody that you must comply to, like you comply to security, you must comply to others. But so it's complexity on developers' maturity and complexity of environments and tools and technologies we use to deliver.
Like to add to some of those examples there of developers perhaps not knowing or what to do, or the instructions aren't clear. The culture, I think, is an underpinning theme here. Is so important. I mean, the culture set from top down, and if it's all just about let's ship it out as quickly as possible, this whole thing of move fast and break things is really going to bite you in the backside this time, because it's almost like once you make a mistake with this, there is no turning back. So if we're just shipping stuff just for pure commercial gain, as opposed to considering things from a holistic standpoint, it can really bite you. Obviously, I won't mention any names, but some of the experiences I've seen where developers are, should we say, put under unreasonable deadlines and they made mistakes and pushed stuff into production which was not ready, caused both them distress, caused operational headaches, and then got the legal team involved. And to possibly add a bit of a lighthearted side, whenever you get the legal team involved too much, you're doing something wrong.
That's an important point, probably. So what we need to look at also is that how much clarity is there, and the way I think Michael just gave an example of from practical experience point of view is that I don't think you can jump into building solutions immediately, at least in this space. What max can be done to assess maturity of developers is to bring a small portion of that as a proof of concept or something like that. Start with it and refine and be confident that yes, we have the necessary steps or the necessary components from legal, from operations, technology development, release, even the commercial aspects about how to price the product, how to take it. At the end of the day, it is all about ROI, right? What dollars I'm spending on it and what I'm getting out of it and when, right? This is the essential question which will be there at the topmost level of the organization. So bringing all these departments together to drive this and take it forward, and as I said, continuous evaluation and doing small pieces like POCs first and then extending and scale it into different bigger solutions in the future is going to be the way to handle maturity of development of the technical team.
Yeah, I agree. Doing the POCs is crucial, and we do that a lot, even in larger, longer projects, to test new angles of tackling things. Just do a small POC, see if it works, and get approval before doing something bigger.
I think the biggest takeaway for me from this panel discussion, from this conversation at large, is that this is all easier said than done. This is a multi-party, multi-level negotiation, intricate dance that has to do with the business, with the government regulations, and the technical implementation details. Are there any words of advice from your respective areas of domain, areas of expertise that you'd like to impart on anybody that might be watching this that holds a similar title to you or similar perspective?
I would say in this space, no matter who you are at the bottom or top of the organization, you have to learn. That's constant, and that learning cannot stop immediately. Also, there is new technology coming, and there is approach coming, and there are new things evolving. One of the advice I will say that never stop learning on this topic, especially because, and that applies to any other as well. But you cannot be sure at any point in time, irrespective of what function you are in. And if you're in the function of managing different functions to bring them together, your job is all the more difficult. So watch out, talk to people, try to go into forums and try to understand what other people are doing, what problems they're facing. And that's the only way to move forward. I don't think anybody knows the answer to any question very definitely.
Yeah, I will go, for any CTO, CIO, if you guys not heavily on machine learning, it's time to rush. I think, clearly machine learning will be key for every business, I think right now, and I don't think any business will be able to survive not having, very deep, machine learning. And part of that advice is, you need to start early, and, you need to make sense of your data. And if you don't know what is knowledge graph and semantic layer and how to take care of your data, it's good time to start. And whatever you do, right, you need to get to the core to your data and properly do it, right? And then you can go upper layers, right? But I think clock is ticking. And I think, you need to be very aggressive to and take some risk, right, to start implementing some areas and start bringing, machine learning to your organization.
Just like to add on those excellent points. KYAI, really simple. Wherever you're on the life cycle, at the start or the end, know exactly what AI system, models, algorithms, and prompts you're dealing with. Make sure they're risk classified, and then go from there. To draw an example, if you think of the R&D process for drug development in the US, you could spend millions or a large portion on developing a product, get all your stakeholders aligned, all those bits and pieces, and then get to the final stage and be told, yeah, you can't deploy it because it's not compliant. And that would completely cripple and render the entire process redundant. So knowing KYAI is phenomenally important.
Yeah, I would agree here, and that always keep learning, be curious, and if you haven't already, then start investing in knowledge graphs, because that's going to be key to a lot of these issues.
Thank you very much, everybody, for taking part in this panel discussion. We're going to take a brief intermission. Some people are going to take lunch. Some people are going to go take a nap. Whatever you do, stay tuned, and we'll be back for the second half of the first day's event. Take advantage of these networking opportunities, and feel free to connect with whoever comes across your channel. Again, thank you guys for taking the time to participate in the panel discussion. We'll be coming back.
Thank you.
Thank you.